Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday, January 12, 2012. I'm Aaron Dykes, and we are again going to battle for reality against those who would universally deceive, just as in the George Orwell quote. Now, we have some big Hollywood stars in tonight's broadcast. Don't want to give the names away, but Brad Jelena is coming up. So is Paul Joseph Watson, editor of PRISONPLANET.com, with his analysis on Iran. But first, we have plenty of news. Now, Homeland Security is admittedly monitoring the Drudge Report, the New York Times, social media, and plenty more. And no, it's not because some jihadist is twittering, OBL would have been proud of me for my upcoming attack. This is a war on us, as we all know, and Homeland Security is nothing more than a Stasi network. But of course, we already knew that Homeland Security was spying on the Drudge Report, as well as INFOWARS and plenty of other places. That came out in December of 2010. People like Congressman Bob Barr vowed to investigate it and were plenty mad about the infringement of civil rights, something to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, cashless society. India implements the first biometric ID program for all of its 1.2 billion residents. Not only is this a gigantic feat, it's a very scary big brother move. Recently, India has launched a nationwide program involving the allocation of a unique identification number, UID, to every one of its 1.2 billion residents, many of whom live in far-reaching rural areas. Each of the numbers will be tied to biometric data of the recipient using 3 different forms of information: fingerprints, iris scans, and a picture of the face, and all 10 digits of the hand will be recorded, as well as both eyes. And Aaron Sains of the Singularity Hub is quoted in here saying he wouldn't be surprised if it went on to be part of a cashless payment system. In fact, writes Brandon Turbeville, the author of this article, this is exactly the intention with India's new biometric ID program. In fact, the cashless society is the stated goal of the UID program. CEO of Mindtree's IT Services, the company awarded with the government contract for development and maintenance of the UID, explained in an interview with Computer Weekly that the ID scheme will support a cashless society. He said all vendors will have a biometric reader and citizens can pay for things with a fingerprint scan, even a bag of rice. Not only is this incredible, it's very sad, especially given the fact that Gandhi, father of the Indian nation, started his protest in South Africa against biometric systems created by the eugenicists, no doubt. Including fingerprint cards and identification cards. They burned them in protest, but now India has turned its back on their founding father and implemented an awful, far-reaching biometric program. And of course, it's coming to the rest of the world as well. Another test case. Meanwhile, scientists find that people are addicted to computer use, especially on the internet. Internet addiction has for the first time been linked with changes in the brain similar to those people addicted to alcohol, cocaine, and cannabis. In a groundbreaking study, researchers used MRI scanners to reveal abnormalities in the brain of adolescents who spent many hours on the internet to the detriment of their social and personal lives. They found that the white matter fibers of the brain connected to everything from emotional processing, attention, decision-making, and cognitive control were all affected. And in some ways it's a no-brainer, but at the same time they found that people who are addicted to online games are particularly vulnerable to the addiction, many of them staying up all nights playing it and the rest of it. Meanwhile, Dr. Andrew Wakefield has sued the British Medical Journal and journalist Brian Deer for defamation because he had to, because it's common sense, but they won't tell the truth as usual. The man who has been shamelessly mocked, repeatedly lied about, and cruelly defamed for his legitimate scientific research into the combination of measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine and autism in children. But Dr. Andrew Wakefield is now fighting back against those responsible for viciously denigrating his work and character by filing a lawsuit against the British Medical Journal, which published lies about him, and journalist Brian Deere, who authored many of those lies. What other choice do you have when they just try to mock you for pointing out that these vaccines are hurting people? It's a lot more than just his name at stake. These are actual, real children being affected. And in fact, when we go to break coming up, we're going to play an interview Alex did with one autistic child. His father said that the autism came up after the second round of shots. I don't recall which one, but it's in the clip. That's coming up later. But just so many children it's affected. There's obviously something going on, and Wakefield is a respectable guy. He's been doing real research. It's a shame that they attack him. In other news, South Carolina officials are investigating 900 dead voters who were found to vote in recent elections. Director Schvado's research has revealed evidence that over 900 deceased people appeared to have voted, quote unquote, in recent elections in South Carolina. Said a statement Wednesday. An alarming number clearly necessitates an investigation into potential criminal activity. Of course, it's nothing new. They've been stuffing ballot boxes and putting dead people's names on voter registers for a long time, but it's just a reminder that so-called elections have never been fair and free. They've always been controlled by the system. In many cases, different criminal factions stealing elections against each other. So how would an honest person come up? Now, meanwhile, we have video from New Hampshire in the primary where one person did an investigation where they went to the ballots and used dead people's name, and they were given ballots. They didn't actually vote, but we're going to show part of that clip now where they demonstrate how they were allowed to vote with dead people's names in New Hampshire just the other day during the primary.
Democratic ballot. There you go, Mr.
Now, I'll tell you what, I've left my
and there you
ID
can see
in the
the
car.
birth date and the death date of the name that they're using.
Not required.
I don't need it. I'll go and get it anyway if you don't mind. I prefer to. I don't need registration. I don't need identification.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Oh boy.
We have you here. You just have to.
Yeah, as long as you're on our registered poll list, you're allowed to vote.
I can just vote, that's okay. All right, well, I'll get my ID anyway. But thank you very much. See you shortly. Bye-bye.
Here we are, George F. at St. James Place.
That's the address.
Okay, and you're a registered Democrat.
That's the registration.
Okay, so here's the Democratic ballot, and the pens are in the booth.
I haven't got my ID with me, my identification.
You don't have to. In the state of New Hampshire, they don't require it.
All right, there's no way of checking who's voting.
If somebody else came in and said they were George Darcy, we wouldn't let them vote because we've now checked off George Darcy.
Okay.
And that's the only check there is
All
in
right,
the system.
I got some ID anyway.
Oh,
I got some ID. I wrote it.
You don't have to go. You can go.
It's okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
You have a Thomas McCarran?
Okay, Tom. Take one of these chips. Go over
And this video goes on and on. It's over 10 minutes long. You could debate if it's a good idea to require identification when voting, but obviously it can play into the hands of voter fraud. They can obviously use black box voting machines as well. Now, I said it was a struggle for reality. That's because we've obviously been following the corporate prostitute media's ongoing attacks against Ron Paul, including the very popular meme that he can't win, that he's not a real candidate. So tonight we're going to award the first ever prostitute media award, and it goes to Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC. An avowed socialist, I believe. I don't want to totally quote myself on that, but I remember seeing him talking about some of his extreme views, but of course he defines reality for us. Let's go to that clip now.
Romney, the projected winner tonight in New Hampshire. Ron Paul, the projected second-place finisher right now with 14% of the vote in.
Then you have to look at the fraud in the campaign, the Republican fraud, which is the libertarian Ron Paul, who is not a candidate for president. He is not going to get the nomination. He is not going to be given a prominent speaking role at a Republican convention. They can't have a guy up there saying what he says. He is in there to push his ideas and for whatever individual reasons he has. So if you take Ron Paul out of this, and if you take out all those independent voters who went out there today for Ron Paul, what would have happened to Huntsman? Huntsman is the real second here. He came in the real second. He came in the real second. He came in the real second. He came in strong.
Yeah, Huntsman's the real winner, a guy who had no pulse in polls for months, and then he was propped up by the establishment after so many other candidates fell off the wagon. It's amazing how many media personalities tell us they can predict the future and really have such contempt for voters. And that's why we're giving him the Prostitute Media Award. But in conjunction with that, I want to read some quotes about the CIA's involvement in media, just as one caveat to how controlled the sad, sick corporate media is. You got the Rockefeller foundations, the Ford Foundation, all these big money interests controlling everything, skull and bones with all these members in the media, including the founders of Time Magazine, Life Magazine, and the rest of it. Here's William Colby, former CIA director in the 70s, saying the Central Intelligence Agency owns everyone of any significance in the major media. You've also got a quote from a CIA operative in a book about Katharine Graham, the head of the Washington Post, a lifelong Bilderberger and total operative. You could get a journalist cheaper than a good call girl for a couple $100 a month. How's that for a prostitute quote? Cheaper than a call girl. That's what a prostitute is, these corporate media hacks. You've also got William B. Bader, a former CIA intelligence officer, saying it's quite incredible spread of relationships. You don't need to manipulate Time Magazine, for example, because there are CIA agency people at the management level. Yeah, those are skull and bones people. Henry Luce, among others, and one of the Harriman brothers, I believe. You've also got Carl Bernstein, one of the two Watergate reporters. The agency's relationship with the New York Times was by far its most valuable among newspapers. According to CIA officials, it was General Times policy to provide assistance to the CIA whenever possible. Those are all kind of classic quotes under the Operation Mockingbird model.